Welcome, everybody. This is our June 13th, 11 a.m. policy meeting. I am going to call it to order. Seeing that we have no public comment on agenda items, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Graham to get us started with our policies.
Thank you. Good morning. We are going to start with policy JICJ. I know that we had GBEBA on the agenda, but at this time the district does not have any recommendations to present, so we will skip forward to JICA if that's all right with the board.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. JICJ is possession, use of personal electronic devices or district-owned devices. This is a current policy but significantly updated, so you are just presented with the updated policy here for your review. There's also an administrative rule which we can look at separately, but I will give you some time to review this and answer any questions you have.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, at this time, when we're looking at policy GICJ, possession, use of personal electronic devices or district-owned devices, we've had much discussion. This is regarding the cell phones in schools, K through 12. We're able to meet with our current administrators, elementary, middle school, and high school. And when we looked at this policy also with Dr. Robbins' guidance as well, we've kind of put some things on this policy and what this will look like. Again, when we came to this policy, our main focus was to protect the instructional minutes within the classroom. Has become a distraction within the classroom for our teachers and trying to minimize those distractions in the classroom. And that's the basis of this policy. And so when we look at this, we can kind of go through this policy and turn it over to Ms. Bates, who is our policy chair, about if she has questions of what this policy would look like moving forward, and also then the operational, what that would look like as far as consequences and how that will look. So we're open for questions.
All right, I'm just reading the one in here. Is this a model policy, or is this just?
No, this was at the direction of Dr. Robbins, a different version of the policy from what we have now. But this is not a red line version because it is significantly different in terms of the language itself.
And yeah, and I can kind of comment on that. We had meetings at some of our principal meetings, and we had a Zoom call yesterday with principals with this policy that Dr. Robbins had kind of put together, kind of with guidelines and kind of guardrails as we were going through this. And you can kind of see as the elementary schools, pre-K through 5th, they can possess personal electronic devices on campus and on school-sponsored transportation, provided such devices are not visible, used, or activated, or kept in the off position throughout the instructional day. Students must keep such devices stored in a backpack or a non-visible secure location during the instructional day. That is K through 5.
Okay, so I'm looking at the policy. I don't see, are we going to work on the rule as well? Because that's all part of the rule.
Yes, that's all in the rule itself, yes. So we had the policy first and then the rule separately.
Okay.
I think the policy just has a more broad stance and then the rule has
the specifics, yeah. Mr. Doherty, I wanted to get your feedback regarding the policy in as far as naming cell phones, smartwatches, gaming devices, phone accessories, including headphones and earbuds or other devices that emit audible signal, vibrate, display message, display that whole line under the policy specifically, because you were addressing the rule. Policy JICJ, which is just essentially the policy, and then when we get down into the elementary school breakdown, middle school, high school, that's going to be our rule. So the policy is the overarching, broader expectation, and then the rule gets into the specifics of it. So under personal device, we specify what that entails. And I know we've had some dialogue around that, and I'm happy to get feedback from any of our principals as well if they have anything in regard to what they would like deemed a personal electronic device. but I know you mentioned earbuds possibly.
Yeah.
And smartwatches not being included in that.
Well, I think one thing that we did talk about that was smartwatches. I know smartwatches are activated when they are tied to the phone and getting messages. We do have several smartwatches that can get music and still play that with earbuds. One thing we talked about with earbuds, especially at the high school level when you get into some of the other things, but I think when you're looking at those, I think it all comes from the cell phone. That cell phone is the major issue that we're having in a lot of our instructional time, which is tied to the headphones, also the gaming and the smartwatches. And so when you look at this, I think we were all very comfortable with this policy because we could have some students that decided to maybe not have their phone powered down. And if they did not have their phone powered down, those smartwatches would be activated. So I think keeping the smartwatch in there is still acceptable, but I'm not sure that is something that we will, if we see a student have it on the person, that we would take that smartwatch because is it really activated? Are they using it for the purposes of videoing, or are they using it for messaging? Unless, again, that cell phone has to be turned off, and really we're trying the parameters within that instructional minutes during class time.
So do you want the smartwatches to be included in, because this is basically stating that they're not allowed, correct, in the policy?
It would be that they can only be used at the same time that cell phones would be allowed to be used.
So,
And I do just want to clarify that some smartwatches can work
Yeah,
without a cell phone, so I think that is a concern.
because you get cellular reception, you can purchase cellular reception on your cell phone, or you can have like the, Wi-Fi only smartwatches that do, like you said, work in correlation with your phone. Mr. Farnsworth, do you have any feedback?
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out, because general statement, that we're changing it to personal electronic devices, right?
Right, the intent was to define a personal electronic device as all of those things listed there, and then address it as a personal electronic device going forward. And so smartwatches would be permitted at the same time that cell phones are permitted, and same for earbuds.
Yeah, I think the big thing, we just don't want to pigeonhole ourselves, because and that's why we're saying includes but not limited to, because there will be technology that is available next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we don't even know about.
No, I understand that. I guess my question and what I would like to know, and especially from our principals, is do we want smartwatches? Because that's saying, like, if I'm a student and I show up to school and I have my watch on, I'm breaking the rule, right, essentially?
You would be expected to put it with
Put it
your
away.
cell phone when
Yeah,
it is
like
an appropriate
in
time
that
to do that.
secure area.
I don't want to take over for our principals, but I suspect that if it were not presenting an issue, I don't know that they would make them. Middle school, they do. Right, and I do believe that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if the expectation is going to be like, let's say the expectation is when they report to class, they put their cell phones in the designated area. Is their expectation going to be to take off their watch and earbuds and also put them in the designated area? Because if we're lumping them all under the same definition and they all fall under the same thing, technically we would be saying when you report to class, you put your cell phone in there, but like, let's say Kelly reports to class and I have my watch on, am I expected to put my watch in there, or are we gonna address watches as a separate issue? As in, like, if we notice, like, hey, your cell phone goes in the area, but watches, if they become an issue. And that's kind of what I'm trying, I don't wanna lump it in together if the enforcement or expectation of what we're doing with them is different. Does that make sense?
And I think we just have to be careful, because again, and I understand the concern with the watches. I have a smart watch, so I fully understand the technology, but you gotta remember that, so earbuds can do the same thing. I can talk to Siri in my ear and say, send a text message to Christy. And so I think you just have to be very careful on limiting what we're saying there. I think if we just go back to the overarching reason, to me, and correct if I'm wrong, there's two reasons that we need this policy to be more in-depth, right? Instructional time, that's prime focus is instructional time. But B, and I see Mr. Giant out there, I think B, we're also having some security issues.
Yes.
With children taking videos, posting those videos. Obviously, that's a major concern for our school district. Again, I'm always a big proponent of keeping a policy very, very high level and then letting the district manage it as they see fit.
Well,
I don't know that we need to sit here and figure out whether we're going to let a student wear a smartwatch or not.
Well, that's my point, is if it's in this policy and then we go over to the rule, and the rule is, and am I incorrect, is the rule specify personal electronic device or only cell phone goes into the?
Personal electronic devices.
So what we're saying is in the rule, when they report to class, they're going to have to put their phone in a designated area. They're not even like gonna be able to hide it in their backpack, they're not gonna be able, they're gonna be expected to surrender their phone to the area, because that's a personal electronic device. Now, if we're identifying a watch and an earbud as a personal electronic device, to me, that's saying in the rule, I now have to surrender both of those. So can we, I guess if we include those in personal electronic devices, can we specify in the rule what's done with a watch versus what's done with a phone? I don't know.
And
Does that make
I think
sense?
the intent would be that the same thing would be done with them, because if you take a student's cell phone but you don't take their watch, they would just be able to continue to use their watch as a cell phone.
Right. I think you're eliminating the video aspect. I think it's a lot probably hard. I don't know. I would love some input from our principals on what they think. I just don't want, I already know surrendering the phone is going to be a thing. So then surrendering earbuds and watches, like, is that something that's even feasible, realistic, or something we want to include?
Yeah, so I'll speak for myself, and Michelle can jump on if she agrees or not. But I think what I just heard you say as I was walking up is really two-pronged. When you look at the issue of, taking video, the safety, those types of things, I think we're all in agreement here that we want to be able to stop that or control that. That there should be no videos taken without permission. We certainly don't want people taking videos of things that shouldn't be happening in our schools and then posting them elsewhere. That's not okay. So we would like to guard against that. I'm not sure the best mousetrap or policy or whatever we do to fix that, but we want to cover that. I thought I understood too, as we discussed this, that right now around our country, in our state, elsewhere, I think from our board, there is the notion that the cell phones are getting away just of the education of our children. They're a distraction from what's going on in the classroom most of the time when they're being used. And so the idea that we want to keep that distraction out of the way in the classroom is, I think, separate from like the video piece, especially when we get to the rule or the management piece that I'm charged with as principal. When we talk about what's going on in the classroom, and specifically you asking about the watch and the earbuds and the phone, if we don't want it to be a distraction, I wear this. I am addicted to my phone, I will admit, and I understand, and you're not going to stop people from using it unless we take it off their person, not in our high schools. That is the problem now. If you've ever heard from any of our teachers that cell phones are a problem or cell phones are a distraction, we deal with cell phones now. I think as part of the sample policy is written, it would still look very much the same if they're allowed to keep it on their person. The students who are addicted to their phones will try to use their phone. Then we are asking our teachers, who I only want to ask to plan and deliver good lessons, I'm asking them now to monitor cell phone use, monitor use of the watch, monitor whether there's an earbud in their ear, and whether or not there's sound coming from some device to that earbud. Teachers don't want to worry about that because they want to focus on teaching the students. And so I think when we're valuing our staff, trying to maximize our roles and what we're doing, and then for our role as an administrator to enforce this, they can't have any of that if we want to eliminate the distraction. And I think that's where we landed at the language in
Right.
lumping it all into that term and saying it can't be on their person. And so we've discussed options of having them come in the room and put all of their devices included there, in a pouch or in a box or in whatever contraption we come up with. And they have to have a routine in every classroom. And we explain to our teachers, our expectation is follow that routine. And in turn, that saves you the need to monitor and feel like you have to look. I remember back in the old days, the worst thing was teachers had to figure out if somebody was chewing gum in the room, you know? Now there's a lot more to that, right? So in addition to teaching, you're worried about whether or not they have this device and they're using this device.
Right.
And so that's why we wrote it that way. And it sounds horrific. I'm thinking, you know, in my household, my son who has a smartwatch, I just tell him, look, don't wear your smartwatch to school if this is how it's going to be.
Right.
Because I don't think taking your smartwatch on and off, that seems weird. You know, so get a regular watch if you need to tell time. Don't use a smartwatch at school because every 90-minute period, you're going to have to take it off and put it with your phone in the box. You got to take your earbuds and put them in the phone. And they're all Bluetooth connected, and our rooms, frankly, are small enough that you can stay Bluetooth to your phone over there in the box or the pouch and still get something on your earbuds, still get something on your watch. And so I think they have to take it all off if we don't want it to happen in the classroom.
So even shutting down the phone and putting it in the box would not be sufficient. It would need to be all of it
Well, so
going
many
in
of
there.
my students carry a burner phone, as they say in the vernacular. So there are burner phones we're not going to find. There are watches that connect without phones that have their own plan with the carrier. So it gets around all of that. So whether it Bluetooth or whether they use it themselves, one thing that I was thinking as you made your point, one thing we didn't write in there is the new smart glasses. And Justin just said, Mr. Farnsworth just said, you know, there's new technology coming. You know, the smart glasses are here and they will be more prevalent in years to come. I mean, you can get them in Ray-Bans if you want to be
I
fashionable.
didn't even
They
know
have
that was a
smart glasses.
thing.
So,
Yeah, and again, and that's all I'm saying. This is a really, folks understand, this is a really tough egg to crack
It is.
because there's never, ever, ever going to be a silver bullet for this. But I mean, I agree with the intent. I know what the intent is.
Yeah.
But how do you fix that? At the end of the day, look, we can take everything. We can strip them down to everything. They can come in with their clothes. We can get rid of burner phones, and we can do all that stuff. But they will figure out a way on their laptops to find distractions on their laptops.
Well, I think the goal is obviously to minimize it and minimize stuff like you were saying, that the incentive to go to the bathroom and meet Joe in there and start a fight and stage it and video it because you now have your cell phone on your person, and the distractions in the classroom. Ultimately, trying to reduce the amount of things. And the only reason why I'm asking about this is not because I disagree or agree or anyway, is I want to make sure what we're tasking you with makes sense and you support that and you think it's enforceable. I don't want to say you guys have to take away cell phones and watches and earbuds and then you're like looking at me all crazy like, what the heck is Kelly Bates
and-
asking us to do? So that's why I want to make sure that that's
and I think that's where the high school principals find ourselves as we've kind of talked about this is to Mr. Farnsworth's point a minute ago, he wants policy to be high level and not too restrictive, and then we work on the details down the road.
right.
But we are also trying to back into this a little bit. What does enforcement of the policy look like? I'm telling you that our teachers can't, and we feel like it'll put us in a tough spot as administration to try to come down on the teachers more to monitor whether or not they're sneaking any of the devices we have listed, to maybe include glasses that I'd like to point out now, to, you know, whatever those devices are, how we define it, to allow them to have any of that during the instructional time in the classroom. I think our easiest enforcement
Just
mode
none.
is to make them have to take it off their person. And we've gone so far as to say, as an administrator walking into a room, I should walk into a classroom with 28 students and be able to see where they're storing their devices in the box or in the bag or whatever. And I should see 28 devices. If I only see 5, that's a conversation I need to have with that teacher. Why did 23 students not put their device? Because all 28 of them have a device, rest assured.
Right.
They have a device. So if that thing is not full when I walk in a classroom to match the number of kids, the teacher's not following our expectation to put it there. I think a reasonable expectation for the teachers is set our procedure, same from class to class, put your stuff in there when you come in the room, take your stuff when you leave the room.
Yep, I hope.
And I think that's manageable for us. If we allow, I'll go on record, if you allow them to keep it on their person, we're going to
Oh,
be
yeah.
chasing the
That's a
discipline of a kid sneaking their stuff. They're still going to sneak a burner phone or they're going to sneak something else, but the few kids that are able and willing to do that, I'll chase them, but I can't chase the 99%.
It minimizes it to the amount. Now, oh, go ahead. Do you?
Well, so from an operational perspective, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because right now, I mean, in theory, right now, they're not allowed to have their phones on during instructional time.
Yeah, so what's essentially happening in our high school, and it may not align exactly with our written policy that still has pagers in it at the time, but it's up to the teacher in the classroom. And I think what all of us are saying is that generally the default is no cell phone in the classroom. They're allowed to keep it on their person, but you shouldn't have your cell phone out. The teacher may choose to allow them to use their cell phone, and that has happened. That's what's currently happening. What happens in each of our schools, if a student has their phone out and they're not supposed to have it out, they call for administration, and we come and remove the student and the phone from the classroom.
See, and I think that's the hard part, right? Because if I'm a student and the precedent, if I go to Miss Smith's class and she's like, oh yeah, okay, but then I go to Miss Jones and she's like, put your phone away, you can't do it, I'm gonna confiscate it. Like that sends a mixed signal. And so.
Well, that's why we're addressing this policy.
So potentially
yeah.
this positive, but again, I just want to go back to the fact, we have it in policy right now. The phone should be off, devices heard or
That's why we
seen.
want to surrender them instead of.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, that's the
Okay,
difference.
yeah.
That's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
wrap my head around.
having
is
that
the
routine and having
difference.
them take it off their person and surrender the phone is the only way we feel like we can
To make it
reasonably
uniform.
manage that.
So I used to substitute teach at a much smaller school, but that's how we took attendance for the class. So there was a shoe, like the shoe thing that you put the shoes in. It was hung behind the teacher's desk. You go to the class, you stick your phone in your designated number. I'm like, 11 is missing. Joe, where's your phone? And I would know that if Joe's in my class and his phone's not in there because he didn't put it there, so he has to put it there. And they couldn't get it. It was behind me during instructional time. And then at the last 5 minutes of class, they would pull it from their thing and go about their merry way and go to their next class. And that was the expectation. And for us, I saw a lot of success in a smaller capacity because it's a lot harder to monitor when you're expecting it to put it in your backpack. But is it feasible to do each class period, or would it be better to do at the beginning and end of the day? And that was something I know that was discussed as well, so I wanted to get your feedback on that too.
And I'll speak, Michelle, feel free to take the mic from me. I think that that day long is difficult. If we are going to allow during ILT or during other times, I think it's going to be very difficult not to have them have their phone. I think taking it, giving it back for ILT, taking it back is nearly impossible. We discussed, Yonder is a brand name, Yonder bags, that they use like at concerts and stuff that don't allow the signal to come out. There are schools in the vicinity that have used these. I happened to run into somebody that works at James Island Charter High School at a birthday party a few weeks ago. And when I asked him about it, his face just sunk, his whole demeanor.
Yeah.
It's been a terrible experiment for them. He did not recommend it at all. I can go into details, but that's probably the only way I could see that we could maybe
Do it
take them
all
for the
day.
day. And he just said it doesn't work well, and did not advise that we go that direction. I think they're changing their plan going forward. Next year is what I've heard. So I just don't think day long is the thing. The only thing we control is a routine from class period to class period.
And then that being consistently first. That helps a lot. Okay.
And we were very adamant about, I keep saying routine because I mean a consistent, like the place you put your phone is pretty much in the same place in every room.
Yeah.
The expectation to walk in the door and put it there,
Put
like
it
you
there,
said,
yeah.
use it for attendance is the same. We're going to teach that to the teachers. We're going to expect that of the teachers. And I want it to be, like almost like Pavlov's dog. Like when you walk in a door, you're grabbing your phone and putting it in the.
That's how it
That's what
became.
I do. I'm trained to do that. And so that would become routine, and I mean that in the firmest sense of the word routine for our students. Everybody does it that way in every class all day long.
Awesome.
First of all, I do apologize. My car wouldn't start, so I had to wait until I could get here. But anyway, the bottom line is, I think if we give too many options, there's a breakdown. And when the breakdown happens, the kids take advantage of it. So the bottom line is, I don't think the teachers should have the option of, well, he's a nice kid. No, everybody has to do the same thing. And so we, at least me, I'm going to look for the principal to call that teacher in if you allowing that teacher to have discretion. Yeah, Johnny might be a nice kid, but the bottom line is the phone has a place to go. We want everybody to do it. Too many times the sub have an issue because they don't feel they have to respect the sub. But if it's a format that has already been put in place, everybody should have to do it. If it's your kid, your child, your personal child, you may think that they're whatever, but your child's phone has to go in there. And you have no business, even if you work in the district, you have no business going and confronting a teacher about the fact that your child had the phone taken. Everybody's child has to have the phone taken.
Yeah, and I agree, especially if we are able to put this policy through this summer, be ready to start. we get a hard reset at the start of the year, we're all ready to go with that routine. I think, given what the policy says now and where we have been up until today, I think the toothpaste is out of the tube, so to speak. There was a time before we had devices in every child's hand. We've used red, yellow, and green cards in the room. Green means we're using our cell phone. Yellow means only with permission. Red means absolutely not. We've done all of those things, and it's been a mismatch of that. But we firmly and forever, I think, for our involvement in education, will have devices in the children's hand where they can access the World Wide Web and do what they need to do with that. So I don't see the need for the phone, their personal device, anymore. And I think, again, setting a routine, and I think I do speak for all 3 high school principals, that we are comfortable setting that routine, expecting our staff to uphold that, and no, there will be no, we are ready to, as administrators, to step in immediately when this child comes in and says, I'm not putting my phone in there today. Well, they're not having class in there today, they're going with the administrator.
And what I would like to see happen, if at all possible, after maybe 4 weeks, whenever you all think is best, if you kind of give us some kind of readout on what's happening as far as the policy that we're going to eventually put in place regarding this, to see if that's working. If it's not, then we have to go back to the drawing board and come up with something else.
We can always tweak it if need be, but I think that's a really good point.
I don't want to wait a whole year before I get an update. I just want to know,
Yeah.
is this
Hey,
really
how's
working?
it working so far? Do we
Yes.
need to maybe pull it?
And again, Mr. Farnsworth's point is writing the policy high level. Let's not paint ourselves in a corner, so to speak. Let's make a workable policy. The actual final details of enforcement boil down to what we're able to manage, and we can report back absolutely to you on how that's going.
I kind of had a talk with Ms. Leviner about this too, and I'd be curious to get your perspective as well. I'm torn about putting the enforcement mechanism in the rule, like the kind of what you guys came up with, first offense, second offense, and all that, whether or not we should include it in the rule. From what you just said, it sounds like you want to maybe leave it off. But part of what I was thinking at is the consistency of application across, because it's coming from the district, A. B, when y'all are met with all the angry parents who are like, hey, why am I having to pay, or why is this the situation? It's very clear that this is coming from the district, this is board policy, first offense, second offense, third offense. It's not like one school's doing one thing, one school's doing the other. Not that you guys, I'm sure you guys are all on the same page and will be on the same page, but it also gives you something to point to these people of, hey, this is our district's expectation. We're not just doing this to be, hard on the kids or whatever specifically at this school. This is what our policy says at the district level.
So my feedback is we will absolutely work together on this. We use our discipline matrix now, and I feel like although we don't call each other daily on discipline consequence, we handle discipline daily, and I'm confident in all 3 high schools that similar offenses have similar consequences. We've talked about that, and we have a matrix that we follow. There is room to maneuver because every situation is different, but we want to try to hold solid to a plan. I will say that personally, I do think that writing too much in policy about what we're doing, I know it's maybe helpful for us to point at it and say, oh, well, it's the policy and, don't yell at me. Well, they're going to yell anyway. They've already yelled by the time we've had this conversation. So, that part, if we write it in policy, to your point of waiting a year to fix it, if we decide we don't want to follow that anymore 2 months down the road, we want to make an adjustment, it's a lot longer to change policy than it is to say our rules or our procedures for how we do it are not necessarily written in school board policy. The policy, again, high level, tells us what we are trying to accomplish and what we expect. The actual rules of how we maneuver that, I feel confident I'm in my legal standing as principal of the school. I make decisions and rules and determinations for what has to happen to keep people safe and ensure the education of these students every day. And everything I do and say is not written in a school board policy. That's impossible.
Right.
So we can control the rules or the consequences or whatever, whether they're written in the policy or whether we have just the agreement across our schools and district departments as to how this is being handled. And I think that can be consistent whether you write it in the policy or not. If we do get too descript in the policy,
I understand
it is
that.
harder to change it. If we realize we were wrong, we need to adjust.
And, I agree with that. I just would caution against straying away. You do this for one kid, but you don't do it for the other kid. that you're already going to end up with a mess because the parents will be upset. I would be upset. So when you, and I know that there are extenuating circumstances, and we expect you to know when that occurs. Everybody doesn't have to know that. But for the most part, as much as you can be consistent, the more it will work. And not just make,
And we have spoken at length. We've spent multiple hours, the three of us,
Okay.
talking about this on multiple meeting occasions,
good.
about what we intend to do in lockstep together.
I think the other thing is if you don't put it in policy, it should be in the student handbook, you know, and I think with that student handbook, then that comes your consequences of your steps. So if a parent knows ahead of time, I know here's a student handbook and here are the consequences. Step one, you have your phone, it's confiscated and blah, blah, blah. And step two, second offense is this. So I think if you put it in your student handbook, then that is what parents are going to see, your students see. They all have to sign off on it, and then it's right there. They're supposed to, but there is no wiggle room because it's all spelled out for them. So you as a principal, you can say, here it is. It's in our student handbook. It's been approved by the board. You know, here it is.
Well, they can't say like, I didn't know that, or, you know,
Correct.
where does it say that that's the consequence, or how can you charge me for this, or that's what I worry about. But
We've also discussed to that point that it's worth it if this is a hard reset and a hard, point that we're making to start the coming school year, because the toothpaste has been out of the tube, especially. We need to be very clear. We've talked about sending a flyer just about cell phones. Send something home. Put it on our social media. Put a video together that we show every class during their homeroom about the expectations. I have personal face-to-face meetings with my students at the start of each semester, and it would be one of the things I will address directly as a major point for getting along in the school. Like, listen, this is different from maybe what you've expected or experienced in the past, and here is what we are doing. And don't test us because you will have it confiscated. You will have a fine or whatever we say the policy is going to be. Like, here are the steps. And we're putting it out, and we're willing to do a document and share it across all 3 schools and share it explicitly just about the cell phone thing, because it's going to be stressful for some people. It's going to be tough getting the plane off the ground. But once we're in the air, we're going to be okay.
yeah, it always stinks when you change something. You always have those pains at first, but then people adapt. All right, well, I appreciate you, Mr. Aldrich. Thank you so much. I'll call you back up if I have more. Well, in light of all that wonderful information, I am perfectly fine with moving forward with the personal electronic devices as defined in the
Ms.
policy.
Bates, I do have one question, and this would probably be to Ms. Graham or Ms. Amanda. We do have several students are diabetic, and several students have diabetic monitors on, I know, that are tied to their phones.
Yeah.
And so if that's a medical thing, how do we proceed on this with this policy, Ms. Graham, or with Amanda? I'm just curious on that to help
A
give
good
some
number of
guidance.
students who have 504 plans, but Amanda can address that.
Hello. We do specifically address that in their 504 plan for their disability. So it's an accommodation listed in the 504 plan stating that they have access to their electronic devices at all times. So that would include anything listed in the definition for personal electronic device.
Perfect. I just want to make sure we're well all aware of that one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate you.
I've got kind of a legal nitpicky question.
Okay.
So as far as if we're, I guess, taking somebody's property, because that's a question we're going to get from parents for that time period, we're taking possession of their property. We have the ability to do that. No concerns there.
Ms. Graham, kind of on that before you answer that, but you can first answer that, I guess.
That's a difficult question. We do have authority to confiscate it during the school day and ensure that a student receives that back in a safe and timely manner. But we do have authority to confiscate it just as any other contraband that's against school rules for the period of the school day.
Ms. Graham, I did want to see about possibly, since if we are going to do this and they're going to be surrendering, so to speak, their devices at the beginning of every class, could we, in the student handbook, when they sign off on that, include a liability waiver of some sort? And I know you're like, look at me, and I did actually kind of draft one that I will bring down to look at.
Sure.
And you can tell me if there's
We can
any.
certainly do that. I don't know that it, sometimes it is helpful, so we can certainly do that. It is written in the policy that the district is not responsible for that, for any damage that occurs to a student's phone, et cetera. I think that, to be honest, the hard part that I think we will face is damage that occurs outside of the school but is blamed on the school, and that is a very difficult thing to address in any way. But that is something that we already do now when we confiscate students' phones, and we have to address that currently. So, but we can certainly add a liability waiver. Okay. Sure.
Just to get your feedback on if that would be something to put in the rule, possibly, or.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, typically we wouldn't include something like that in the board policy itself. That would be something that would be part of the student handbook or a separate form that a parent would sign. But we can certainly look over that and consider that as an appropriate action.
Okay.
What was that for? That's for us
So
being liable or for them being liable?
It basically, what it would outline is what I'm proposing, and it's just an option, and I don't know if it obviously have to go through our legal counsel, is it basically says, we have a policy that students must place their phone in a designated area instructed by the teacher at the beginning of every class. They can receive their cell phones from the designated area at the end of class or electronic device. It says the school district will take reasonable measures to ensure the designated area is secure during class times. Teachers will supervise the placement and retrieval of, kind of goes through like just a broad, like, and you can adjust that however you would see fit to like, reasonable measures to ensure it's safe. But at the end of the day, we're not liable for damages of the phone or, whatever. And I think if you do have a designated area, it would be important that teachers between class periods, like at the end, if there is something left in there, they set that device aside so the next class that comes in isn't like, oh, there's a phone in there, and then takes it, you know what I mean? So, or a watch or whatever. So they would have to obviously like clear that area between classes.
That is something that the teachers will also need instruction and guidance from their administration on
Yeah,
how they would
so.
manage that each
But it
class
was-
period. So that is something to be considered. I'm happy to take a look at this. I don't want to.
And
try
you
to
could
read the-
adjust it, and no, yeah, and you're fine. It was basically essentially just saying like, hey, they're gonna be surrendered. This is part of our policy and what we're requiring, and we're not making our admin and teachers liable for like, you're choosing to bring your device to school, and if you're worried about it, don't bring your device to school.
True.
And if you wanna try to say like, you lost your phone, well, you actually left it in the thing or didn't put it in the thing and then try to blame it on a teacher or something like that. I just don't want that to
So,
become an issue.
I might recommend, rather than doing a liability waiver, to add a little additional language here in the policy that just says, by bringing your phone to school, you agree that the district is not responsible for. And that last paragraph there that's on the screen, just adding a provision above, because my concern would be that if we develop a liability waiver, we don't have a way to ensure that we get that back from
And
every
everybody
parent.
sign it. Well, then, if you could add
Sure.
a line like that, and are you good with that? Yeah,
Okay. We could add something like that.
all right.
Just, I wanted to throw my personal 2 cents there with the taking the phone out of their hands piece. One thing that I think is important that we should stress, and that the board, who often takes complaints, would be able to quote as well, is that when they put their phone up in their classroom, they're putting it up, and they're putting it up in their sight. It stays in their sight the whole time they're in the room. So that's helpful to manage that, along with everything you just said, Ms. Bates. And then also from a further confiscation, when it becomes a discipline consequence and a problem that we may take the phone, I just feel like personally what we're doing now is about the extent of my comfort level. And I do take if I were to report to second period because Ms. Bates has her phone out and I have to ask you to step out and come with me, I send you to my ISD room for the rest of the period for creating that disruption. You don't get to finish in the class that period, and I take your phone from you. If you refuse to give your phone up, we're suspending the child for refusing to comply with us. But if you give me your phone, I, an administrator or a security safety control officer or administrator one, will be the one doing this. We take the phone, we have a system for logging the phone and putting the phone in the main office, but we do allow them to get their phone back at the end of the day. We tell them there's gonna be a charge and whether they could pay us immediately or whether we have to put it on their obligation account. We do that for a payment if we're doing that, and then they get their phone at the end of the day, because we do know that having their phones, if they're a latchkey kid or whatever their situation is, they may need or have to have their phone when they leave school. So we do not regularly keep their phones overnight or for an extended period. And I just know that that could be an issue for us if we elected to go into further confiscations, that worries me. So I'm comfortable saying you don't really have to have it the rest of the school day. But when you get ready to leave here, you got to call your mom and tell her you made it home, or you have to call into work, or you have to do whatever you do. They may need to take their phone at the end of the day, so we would make provisions to give it back.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that's reasonable.
And I think, Ms. Bates, I think you've seen some of this, and I know our principals came up with it, and when they met, like, they've kind of put on their classroom, these are kind of the consequences for high school. So again, video, audio recording, sharing the videos, especially on social media, kids making TikToks, that's, that's different. Fights are 5 days if they have to if they're videoing it, or usually, or a hearing is usually. But then the classroom is, refuse to put the phone in the holder, get the phone during class period, have another device. First offense would be ISS remainder of period, 1 day ISS, $25 and confiscate the phone. Second would be ISS remainder of the day, 2 days ISS, 1 day OSS, $25 fee and confiscate phone. Third is ISS remainder of day, 3 days OSS, $25 fee, confiscate phone, school probation. And the fourth referral would be expulsion for hearing. Fee must be paid before phone is returned. And it says if student refuses to hand over device, what you were talking about, Mr. Aldridge, they issue a refusal to obey referral with the consequence. You get a 1 day OSS, second is 3 day OSS, and the third is expulsion for hearing. So I think you all covered all of that. I think those are things you guys all covered with it. So
I actually really like this, and I know we talked about not including this in the rule, and I'm fine with that. But if we do decide not to include it in the rule and we're going to include it in the handbook, I would like to see the first offense, maybe not a fine. And I would like to, apart from that, I'm perfectly fine with this, but I do think it needs to be included somewhere if possible.
you're talking about the fine or take?
Just the expectation. So
yes.
like, I as a parent know that that's going to be happening, you know what I mean?
And I think, Ms. Bates, going back to what you were saying, whether it's in policy or in the handbook, I think most people, parents will go through the student handbook before they're going to go through policy. And in the student handbook are the consequences. So I think, like what you were saying, if this is put in there, then they know the consequences are there. This is what's going to happen. I think is very, very important. So I think, yeah, taking that $25 off as far as the first offense, we can definitely do that. Not a problem.
Ms. Graham, for the statement you were going to add, I do see in this one, it says the district is not responsible. Is this no, this is the policy. The district is not responsible for the loss or damage of any personal electronic device. Are you saying you would add to that by bringing your phone? Okay.
We can. I mean, that statement was already in there with the same intent, but we can add something that by bringing your phone, you agree that.
Okay.
And then continue.
I was
the
just
statement.
clarifying what we were changing. All right. If anybody has any questions or concerns regarding this policy or anything else they would like to share on the policy itself, the JICJ, before we go ahead and pass it for first reading with the proposed change to the last paragraph. We good? We good, Ms. Powell?
Yes.
All right, so that can go on for first reading with the changes to the last paragraph.
Excellent, thank you. So next we do have the administrative rule, which we've already talked a good bit about, but I do want to make sure that we review that separately. That is JICJR, and this just provides more definition and spells out some of the specifics about when personal electronic devices are able to be used and when they are not at the different levels.
I'm just going to read through it one more time, so give me a minute. And I don't know if this is, Mr. Doherty, whenever you're done reading it, if this is something you would like to go through. Are we going to pull it up on the screen too? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I can go through that with
Do
you.
we have it to pull up on the screen, Ms. Graham? The rule? Is that it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I can go through this again, and we're looking at policy ARJICJ-R, possession, use of personal electronic devices or district-owned devices. And so the district's code of conduct is established to achieve and maintain order in schools. Consequences for inappropriate digital behavior will be assessed depending upon the severity of the infraction and level of misconduct. For purpose of this regulation, the instructional school day is from the student arrival at school until the final dismissal bell. Instructional school day includes but is not limited to lunch break, class changes, and other structured or unstructured activities. Students may possess personal electronic devices while on campus only if the student adheres to the restrictions provided herein. Any unauthorized use of the personal electronic device during the instructional school day is prohibited, as it can disrupt the instructional program and/or distract from the educational environment. Earbuds and headphones may be worn in the classroom for instructional purposes or as approved by the teacher. Earbuds, headphones may not be worn at any other time during the instructional day when personal electronic devices are not permitted. And so then it lays out kind of what happens in elementary schools. They may possess personal electronic devices on campus and on school-sponsored transportation, provided such devices are not visible, used, or activated and are kept in the off position throughout the instructional day. Students must keep such devices stored in backpack or other non-visible secure location during the instructional day. Going to transportation, one thing we talked about, and Mr. Shope had spoken about that. Bus drivers have the right to tell students to put those devices away. We do have several times where students do listen to headphones on buses. That does keep them from bringing any issues on the bus. That's what they do. They game. They could be listening to music, which is fine. The big issue is if they're taking that phone and videoing and, you know, bullying or doing things like that. So that's where that bus driver has that right as well. So that could be an issue. So we talked about that, and he wanted to make sure bus drivers still had the right to discipline children with devices.
So do we need to include something like about transportation at the
That
discussion?
is specifically included under all schools at the end of this policy. It
Okay,
says school administrators and bus drivers reserve the right to immediately require that personal electronic devices be turned off and stored in connection with any safety-related initiative.
Can you bold that part about the bus drivers has the right to?
Sure, we can
Because
make that bold.
sometimes, you know, they really don't read it, but if they glance at it, if it's bolded, they'll see that they can ask for that phone or whatever.
Sure, we can bold that.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. I agree. And so then it just goes through when you're looking at the elementary, so there's that. Times of authorized use for elementary school as follows: after the dismissal bell at the end of the instructional school day. Middle school students 6th through 8th grade may possess personal electronic devices on school property, provided they are not visible, used, or activated and are kept in the off position throughout the instructional day and while on school-sponsored transportation. Middle school students must keep their personal devices stored in a pocket, purse, backpack, or non-visible secure location. And so,
Can we change that to the designated, or are we not going to have a designated area for middle school?
when we talked with our middle school principals, we did
Okay.
not have a designation for the middle school principals. They felt like if they were not visible, they felt that was good with the backpacks. They weren't seen as much distractions as they were in the high schools. And so that's why they said if they weren't put in the off position and they were not displayed in a backpack, purse, they were fine.
Does that create any issues with the transition? Like, you know, at middle school having one expectation, high school having another? Do we want consistency? Does anybody have any feedback in regards to that? Or was this kind of vetted through, you're saying middle and high school?
The principals talked about that. So
Aldridge maybe has some insight.
Well, while he's coming up, let me say, especially with middle schoolers, they're visible. They're in the back pocket. You can see it on their person. And so I don't know how that's going to go over if you're just saying it can't be visible, because they will be visible. They weren't supposed to be visible before, but they're still allowed to let them walk around and they can see it.
Right.
Yeah, so the one part of the conversation that I did hear and have with middle school principals, going back to the analogy, I said the toothpaste is already out of the tube at the high school. It's not necessarily out of the tube at the middle school right now. For the large majority, they don't pull their phones out during class and do that. They do keep it away, so they're not having the problem. And I think maybe the idea of having a place to take the phone out and put it in the classroom, they felt like was more encouraging to take the phone out, because a lot of the children do turn it off and put it in their backpack and they don't touch it all day. And so we're inviting them to touch it and to have it out, to put it in the space. And so that's kind of, you know, I think my point too, that if it's on their person, they're tempted to do something. I think that's a concern. And so pocket is not the best choice. We're hoping they have a book bag. They have somewhere else they put it that's not right at their fingertips. But that was kind of the conversation we had, and I think where the middle school principals landed was not inviting them to touch their phone.
I'm just saying, if you're going to say should not be visible, and anybody walking down the hallway can see that phone in their back pocket, walking across campus, then we're defeating the purpose. Say exactly what you want to say.
Ms. Powell, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think some of that could be semantics, because I think what we're really trying to drill down on, when they say visible, they're talking about like, if I've got my phone right here and I'm here, this is visible, versus if I have it in my back pocket. I agree with you, I can see that phone, but that's a difference in visibility, I think is what they're
Well,
talking about.
and specifically the idea of pocket, I feel like we even discussed taking pocket off of there as not an option, but then the point was made that what about a child that does not carry a book bag, does not have a purse, doesn't have any other place to put it? We're not going to let them put it in their pocket? Like, what else do we do? That's all they have is their pocket. So I think that's why pocket was left in there.
But I'm saying, if you're going to say should not be visible, you need to clarify that, because some people are just
Some of
very,
these tiny children can't get their big phone completely in.
I know the phone's bigger
My
than
pants are
they
plenty
are.
big, mine goes in there, but some of these little girls can't get that in the pocket of their little pants. So I don't know the solution, that's just my
Yeah,
experience.
And
Ms.
the-
Graham, could you just say something like, define visible as like outside, I don't know. Is there?
I was trying to think of other words, but I was like non-accessible, but in your pocket is still accessible, so I
Yeah.
don't know.
I think
I'm happy to think on
do you
another
not-
word, but.
Do you not clarify as a visible distraction?
Yeah, maybe that's a good way, or
Visible usage,
Because a big thing at the middle schools, we don't have lockers anymore. Otherwise, you could put 'em in a
accessible for
locker.
use.
And see, a sub coming in,
Could you say
and
like
they can see the
not
phone
visible
and the
or
person-
accessible for use,
So I'm
or
just saying,
something?
clarify that so you don't have anybody confused. 'Cause
I-
when I'm
Or not
walking down the
accessible for
hallway
you,
and I see the
because then that's
phone,
still accessible for
You're
use.
going to
I
see it's
get it in the
visible,
back.
and you're going to
It's
say,
visible
I'm
to
taking
me.
the phone. That's right.
I do think it's semantic.
yeah, I mean, I will say that there was, as Mr. Aldridge alluded to, extensive discussion about that. It was
Yes.
a recommendation to remove pocket, and the middle school principals did feel like it should stay because they did have students who don't have anywhere else to put it, and they didn't see that as a big problem with enforcement. So I'm happy to try to think of some language. I don't
Well,
know if I
even
have
if you
anything
put
off the
something in parentheses that basically say, your pocket can be a storage for your phone or whatever.
That's what it says.
just can't be in your hands or anything like that, whatever way you want to phrase that. But I'm just saying, if you say that, then you made an exception for that one. They didn't say anything. They saw my phone. So then they're going to do the next thing, which is to walk around with the phone in the hand talking.
Well, I think when it says non-visible, secure, it kind of,
Maybe we just remove that second non-visible before secure and just say other secure location.
yeah.
I don't know how people feel about
I'm
that.
honestly fine with it where it's at, because I can't think of a better way to define it without, and you don't want to, again, kind of to the point of some of the people that spoke today, be too specific and then put yourself in a position where now you can't tell a kid to put a phone in their pocket when they're just at school carrying their laptop and have no other, if that's your only avenue. And I think that's fine, and as long as it's not an issue. And then I know if we move on to the high school area, I don't know if you want to go over that, but the allowed, I think it's very much similar, right? Other than.
Yeah, times for of authorized use would be on school-sponsored transportation, before the morning tardy bell to begin the instructional day, after the dismissal bell at the end of the instructional day, during ILT, and other times authorized by the principal. So I think those really covered. Again, we're trying to make sure that our instructional time is guarded, and that's where we're having most of our distractions.
I do have a slight concern, and I'm sure maybe Mr. Aldridge will come up and share with this one. The other times authorized by the principal, my concern is, like, when other time would that be, and what does that look like?
Ms. Graham can correct me, but I feel like that bullet was our safety valve on this. There are times where we have to take away the privilege of ILT, and students have to stay in their SLT time because we've had, non-compliance or dangerous behavior, and we have to close down for that. And so, if we say they can have it during their ILT, which maybe gets translated to, well, while we're closed down for IoT and I'm still in this classroom, but I should get to have my phone. Well, no, we're not allowing you to have your phone while you're here. Or if there were some other reason why, if we had some kind of special pep rally or event or
Right.
something going on where we said you're allowed to have your phone out for this type of event. This is fun time. It's good. Everybody being responsible can use their phone. Then we just felt like there may be something we didn't want to be ratcheted down to never having a safety valve there.
Right, and I don't think this is necessarily a concern. I know our principals fairly well, and I know that you guys aren't going to do this, so please don't misconstrue what I'm asking, but I worry about that line being an opportunity to be like, well, it can be at the teacher's discretion. And then we go back to that. The principal says it could be at the teacher's discretion. If their students finished all their work, then, and that's what I worry about is maybe a school or something then kind of like laxing back on that. So is there a way we can protect against that while still providing autonomy within reason?
I think that's more of a personnel operations discussion. If that is not being abided by at a school, then that would be the superintendent's duty to address that with the administration. I will say that that portion above does clarify that if the principal modifies the definition of the instructional school day and changes it altogether, as Mr. Aldridge said, like if they have to close down ILT, then they would send written notification to the parents and the students clarifying what the cell phone usage would be during that time. But I think for specific circumstances like pep rallies or special events, they do need authority to do that. And if that authority were being misused, then that would be addressed by the superintendent.
Okay, would we normally point to anything to that, or that's just the expectation?
That's just the expectation.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to.
Sure.
We're just down below there. It says during those times in which the use of personal electronic device is not permitted by high school students, a teacher of each course will have a storage device in their classroom. And just to clarify that, talk with Dr. Robbins, that storage device will be determined by the district, what that will look like in their classroom, where students will place their personal electronic devices immediately upon entering the classroom and retrieve the personal electronic devices prior to exiting the classroom for the end of their instructional period.
I know on the storage devices, we've talked about different mechanisms for that, but then I heard our principals mention it being visible while the students in class to know that their device is safe, but I feel like we have to be careful because if we do a locked storage, thing, how are we separating students' devices from one another within that locked storage unit or whatever it is that is determined? Does that have numbered slots that they're identified by?
That does. There's a lot of different units out there. There's lock boxes. I know what Mr. Aldridge was talking about, James Island. I know they went from the pouches. Now they're going to lock boxes, I believe now. Tripp, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what they're going to. There are pouches like you've seen, which are on the back of your
definitely don't want
doors.
to do the pouches. I'm just concerned also about the lack of visibility and then that creating possibly that frustration with, Clear. Okay, see, that's what if we're not gonna do a pouch, I would like to see something that it's still visible so there can't be any.
And then you put it right behind the teacher's desk because that's usually off limits for students, so you wouldn't have students going back behind there. So
Well,
that
just
would be
keep that in mind operationally. I know
Yes.
it's something we can talk to Dr. Robbins about, but I definitely would, I don't know, could we say stored in, where did it specify?
It just says we'll have a storage device in their
We
classroom.
say a visible storage device?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so that makes some clear boxes. We have a few at our school that we've used, and we'd have to research what's available and would work for this school-wide situation. They're like clear Lexon boxes that have individual compartments for each thing. There's also like the shoe pouch kind of thing like you talked about. That you
I
can
like
get
the
clear.
shoe pouch thing, but I do understand that if there's a fire drill and then we had to vacate abruptly and those phones are left unsupervised and then they come back to the room and something's missing, I do see the issues, but then again, you're kind of waiving the liability by, bringing your phone to school in the first place. But I would like it to say visible.
A visible storage device. in the- 'cause
Visible.
I guess it kind of implies that because it says a storage device is in their classroom, but we can put.
Ms. Graham, is there a way we can specify that the devices will be visible in the device? Or,
I mean, certainly if that's the will of the board, we can
don't know.
write clear
Do you
or
go-
translucent in there. I think that the concern that I'm hearing is that there are a lot of different things out there. I don't know that from a safety of the item standpoint, that the clarity of the box is really going to address any of that concern, but
do our principals feel like that matters at all? Like the device being able to be visible to the students or not?
I think it's great. That would be my preference. I don't know, it has to be written into policy.
Okay,
I think we've discussed that that's what we'd like to look for. Look for the district funds the power.
okay.
And again, then that comes down to money as well. So we got to see what we can afford
shoe
as well.
pouches
So,
are
right.
super cheap.
So it might, we don't know, but I think that's why it'll be, if it's left up to the district, I think that will be.
The individual compartment is important.
I do think that's important, yeah.
You're not mistakenly grabbing the wrong one, being able to number the compartments. You use your number just as you described. I think that's all going to help. And if it
Okay.
could be see-through, that's super convenient too.
Okay, that's fine. I'm going to finish reading this and.
Then it talks about all schools, school administrators and bus drivers reserve the right to immediate require the personal electronic devices be turned off and stored in connection with safety-related initiative. And going back to what you said, Ms. Powell, that's kind of that one being bolded there for our bus drivers. They do have that right, especially if it involves with anything safety, videoing, anything like that. The use of the electronic device for picture taking, video recording, audio recording, posting, or text messaging that results in students cheating or which causes or may cause a major disruption will result in additional discipline at the principal's discretion. Students will not use personal or district-issued electronic devices to capture video, audio, or photos of other people at school unless under the guidance of a teacher and related to a curriculum objectives. The posting or sharing of these photographs and videos will result in disciplinary consequences. Student use of personal or district-issued electronic device to engage in illegal or unethical behavior such as bullying, harassment, threats, or intimidation may result in the additional consequences for a student pursuant to the Student Code of Conduct. Student use of an electronic device to wrongfully enhance their own academic performance or another student's academic performance will receive additional consequences for academic dishonesty. Disciplinary offenses resulting from unauthorized use or misuse of technology device may result in restricted right to possess or use personal or district-issued electronic devices. So it kind of covers both there.
And then obviously the last paragraph is basically the administration reserves the right for those additional consequences. Right?
Yes, and I think we talked a little bit about that, and those consequences then will be put in that student handbook, which we need to have there probably at the next board meeting. So
Could
that
we
needs to be-
also include the consequences kind of, I know they're mentioned briefly in what I'm looking at here for the recording as well? Because I know the bringing the device and the confiscating the device is one thing, but then including the consequences for, the unauthorized recording or refusal to turn over the phone.
So I think
within
that's
reason.
included in that first sentence of that main
Yeah.
paragraph there.
Yeah, I meant
And then
in
the
his
second sentence.
Handbook, when he does the handbook, that outlines
Oh,
those.
yes, the specific consequences for
Yeah.
that.
Just so that the parents know, like, hey, your kid was caught recording and that's why they were met with
Right.
this consequence or whatever.
I will just caution that by putting it in the handbook, we are locking ourselves in for the entire school year to that, so I do just want to clarify that. But
Well, I will defer that to Dr. Robbins and Mr. Doherty and to determine.
Yep, that sounds good. We can do that. I think what happens, they talk a little bit about it in our meeting first with our principals, talked about, kind of that refusing to hand over the device. That's that refusal to obey, referral. So again, it kind of could go into that.
Right. I just want to
category.
make sure the expectations are both clear and consistent across the board, and clear to the parents and students what the consequences are. However we do that. I want it to
Absolutely.
be very, very clear. Like I, as a student, know I can see somewhere that if I do that, that's what's happening. You know what I mean? Whether we make an infographic and, like Mr. Aldridge said, like push that out and share that, and then like if we have to revisit that later on down the road and change those, we reshare those expectations at the school level. But something that I, as a parent, I see, like, clearly, like the seat time one we kind of did, like this, if this, you know, something that clearly identifies what the consequences are going to be.
Absolutely.
I remember when we went to one of the COSBA's conferences, and I believe it's here in South Carolina, because the children had a tendency to record the fights and then post them, their consequences was just as bad almost as the person that did the fighting. So that was in order to make sure that those kids did not take copies of it, then post it, because then you end up with a whole nother situation happening.
Yeah, and that was one thing the principals did talk about. If a student did do that, it's just as bad as a fight. They put them up for expulsion, and then they would go up for that. I know that was discussed by our high school principals. So yes, absolutely.
Well, I will defer those consequences and all that to y'all, but as far as the rule goes, I think everything looks good to me. Does anybody else have any concerns or feedback or changes or anything? All right, well then we would like to move the rule on for first reading, and seeing that we are going to table the other two policies, sorry, I'm trying to find which mouse was mine, for the next policy meeting. I see no public comment, so I am going to adjourn.
Thank you.